Of atheists and Christians who we alternate books, atheists and Christians. We look at important books from both perspectives. I know we have some new people here for our August meetup. So how many of you, this is your first time to be at the Atheist Christian? Keep your hands up just a second. So I guess you have to sit in the back if you're new. Is that how it works? Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for being here and to be part of our group, and I hope you have a good time. And again, I want to thank Conrad for providing the majority of the food for our meal that we just shared. Yay! So it's with us is our co-founder, Bill Cluck.
Can I give my testimony?
Yes, as long as it ends with Jesus.
It does, actually.
Well, talk to us.
You know, this book I just love because, it's fun to read about testimonies and stuff. When I was in college, my roommate, I constantly was witnessing to one of those obnoxious Christians, if you can believe this, that was always telling him about Jesus, and we were talking about the Bible for months. So then he's gone for one night, and he comes in, and he goes, "I become a Christian." And I'm like, yes! Was it my exemplary life? Was it my deep knowledge of the Scripture? What is it about you that led you? And he goes, "Actually, you had very little impact on my decision."
It was because of a woman.
Well, he said that his professor told him he loved it. And I went, well, I could have done that.
So is that what turned you to atheism?
Yes. And Todd, if I had been a Calvinist, I would have done so much better because I felt so inadequate. And we had another guy who was a Japanese American, full of hate. I mean, the most anti-God guy you'd ever want to see. We'd pray for him and we'd say, "Can you imagine if he had a Bible and everything?" Met a girl his senior year, became a Christian, and was carrying around a Bible all the time.
Was it Jesus or the girl?
Too, right?
Yes.
The same with a woman that might meet a man. It's not.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So I can see that romantic interest being far more important than whatever you have to say.
But the whole point is, I felt so inadequate as an I never let anybody write. So.
Well, when did you ask Martin Ehrman into your heart?
Well, now that was a very.
Well, let me do this before we get started on this month's book and look into that. I did want to take a moment to talk to you about something I have as kind of a gift. I put this up on our Atheist Christian Book Club Friends of page, and I've had some positive feedback on it. I know this is off topic, but I did my debate with Khalil Meek, the president of the Muslim Legal Fund of America. It's debate on the topic is Jesus Christ, Prophet of Allah or Savior of the World. This was at the Bible and Beer debate forum over in Deep Ellum, and so it's out on DVD now, and we're giving it away actually. So if you're watching by Facebook Live, you can go to the website that we have below, and you can order that from us. But if you're here, you don't have to do shipping or handling. It is free, and we'll pass that out. But I wanted to give you a 3-minute little demo of what that's like. So let me see when you're ready on that. Tell me when you're ready.
Ready.
Okay, let's watch that now.
If you associate anything that you can touch, taste, see, feel, any tangible thing, be it a person, a cow, a star, a tree, a rock, anything, you will go to hell.
This is something that goes against the grain. It goes against Tawheed, the idea of the oneness. In fact, it could be looked at as tantamount to shirk, which is virtually the unpardonable sin. This is the one thing that if you associate the attributes of deity, of Allah, of God, with anyone else, then this is the one thing that I think Khalil put it, will send you straight to hell.
I would encourage all of us, right, me included, Go whatever direction. It doesn't really matter. Be honest to yourself. That's the best advice I can give myself, James, or you. Whatever you believe, believe it. For God's sake, believe it. Sink your life into it. Believe it. Trust it. But as you go down whatever path that is, be sincere with yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Do not get into a position where you get to a point where no matter what happens, you're going to lie to yourself. And if you're honest with yourself, then either you weren't capable of understanding something or God will accept whatever you believe.
I want to end with one final prophecy of Jesus, because he prophesied about me and you. He prophesied about our future. And here's his prophecy. This is John 8:24. I told you that you would die in your sins. For unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. So this is why this is extremely important from our perspective on this. And this is why it's my heart desire. And I know your heart's desire for me to be a Muslim. My heart's desire in prayer is that you, my friend Khalil, would also know Jesus not just as a prophet of God, but also as the Savior of the world and your Savior.
Thank you.
Thank you all. James Walker, Khalil Meek.
We have some more over here too. Pass them around.
So this was at the Bible and Beer Consortium. Did either of you two have beer?
No. We really came out on the bad side of that one.
There's a heavy cigar too, I have to say.
I don't-
Would you agree? Would you agree that there's a heavy cigar? It's Bible, beer, and cigar. They were going to change the name.
Yeah, there is a lot of cigar smoke, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's yeah, it was weird because and I think we didn't have hardly any Muslims there because it's in a bar, so that was a challenge. So.
There's a place in Richardson. It's an open door out on Main Street. That would be a good place to do.
I don't understand the problem. I don't smoke, but I go to smoking places sometimes. And I have no temptation to start smoking.
That could be Bible and Turkish.
If you go to Bahrain, you'll find Muslims doing a lot of things.
Well, let's turn our attention to this evening's book, this month's book, the Atheist Christian Book Club. We're going to be looking at Holly Ordway's book, Not God's Type.
I'm pretty sure you're talking.
Are we looking okay on that? Okay. Oh, really? Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So anyway, so what we're with how many of you got to read the book, the whole thing?
Almost.
How many got to read at least some, couple of chapters? Okay, excellent. This was kind of a change of pace to do a testimony, a story, you know, rather than a lot of the stuff we dealt is, you know, a lot more dealing with factual, you know, argumentation and evidences and things like that. But it's kind of a refreshing. We're going to do another testimony next month as well. But what were your thoughts on that? Anybody want to share?
How about women going first since a woman wrote the book? Cindy, what did you think?
I don't think it was written very well. I think
She's only a PhD in English literature, so.
right. It seems like she presents her viewpoint, but then sometimes makes it seem like everybody should agree, or that it means that everybody goes through the same things. Or
Is that the way you felt, Terry?
This is very interesting because she said it wasn't written very well, and I felt that too. I didn't feel a lot of angst in her her journey, and it could simply, and it's not a judgment thing, it could simply be that that's not the way she wrote. So I didn't see a lot of angst in that. And then what you said about her feeling like it should be this way. There was a line in the book, and I can't remember where it was, but her comment was, if Christ rose, and that's a fact. I mean, that's what she wrote, and that's a fact. And that's in the book, and I was like, whoa. So I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't.
So her arguments, did you feel they had weight? They were substantive?
I felt kind of like, and because of some of the comments she made, that she was kind of like a lost person and she was looking for something. She came across this fencing guy, and she felt, you know, like she had a home then, And then what was the common denominator in the fencing group? They were Christians. So I felt like she kind of was looking for something. I never heard her talk about having children or having a husband or having
That was
a
odd,
family.
yeah.
And I don't know
You know
if
how
she does
women
or
love
not.
to talk about their relationships, their men.
Yeah, we just love doing that.
Yeah, she alluded to it early on
Did
about
she?
a bad relationship that came out, of it, but
Okay.
then she never followed up
So
on
here's
it.
one thing that I learned from listening to a podcast. I cheated. I didn't read the book, but I listened to the podcast that I hosted, right? I think the guy's name is maybe Stein or something. I don't know. Anyway, one thing he pointed
An
out.
Atheist Reads, is that the one you listen
Yeah.
to?
Oh, Steve Shops, which I love.
Yes.
He reads Christian books like, you know, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. And what I like is I can just lay there and let him do all the work.
Yeah, but one thing he pointed out was this was a rewrite. So she'd released this book before to a different audience, and it sounded a little more academic. More like, for example, there was, in one of the quotes that he put up, she used the word, let's see, what was it? Disenchanted, right? Which is a word that I first learned from a secular age. That I always talk about, right? So I think that the first draft of her book was more in line with the academic world that she was in, because she's in liberal arts, English teacher. I mean, I have a liberal
But
arts
did her arguments
degree.
make sense to you? I mean, in the video?
No, it was well, you know, I also watched her talk a little bit at Biola, and she talked about, you know, being creative, right, and the need to be creative. And I don't know to the degree that came in the book, but it just seemed like, I don't know that she's even is she making logical arguments? Or
Well, she's the chairman of the apologetics at Houston Baptist.
Let's go back and set the stage a little bit, just so we're jumping into the book, and some of our Facebook viewers haven't even got a chance to read it yet. So Holly Orway is the chair of the apologetics department at Houston Baptist University, and was a devout atheist, convinced atheist according to her book. And she tells a story about how she basically never. In fact, let me just do this. Daniel has actually one of her students, and you've taken how many classes from her?
3 or 4.
3 or 4 classes from her. So would you mind, I put you on the spot, I didn't ask you to do this.
Sure.
Could you give us a synopsis of the book real quick, and then we
Sure.
can talk about detail?
I read the book 2 years ago with her in one of our classes. Holly was my, she taught a couple of medieval courses, some philosophy courses, a writing course I had with her. I met her in Houston to talk about my coursework and everything. She helped me tremendously with engagement with atheism. Prior to going through HBU, I would never have thought of doing anything like this. And going through, and her bearing with me patiently, of course she's Catholic, it was a very ecumenical spirit. She was very kind and very gracious in terms of how she approached my writing style, my ignorance of the topics at hand, her patient sort of sisterly, motherly sort of mentoring of all of her students. She has a tremendous love for the students that she has. I mean, everybody that has her, you know, she's tough. She's tough academically, but she's also very open personally with students under her care. She was with me. I mean, she was like, I don't know how.
Well, see, that's the problem.
But-
She says she's tough-minded. Intellectually, I didn't see that at all.
Well,
Did you?
With not God's type, as with any of our lives, we put them out there. It's not gonna radiate with everybody, but it's a different approach than, you know, Bill Craig book. You're not going to get a book like this from
Right.
Bill
Well, we
Craig.
can understand that.
And so, Dr. Ordway expressed to us, I remember, you know, the vulnerability that one enters into when you put your life out there like this in print. And so it was really sort of humbling to me to see an academic being willing to lay this kind of treatise out there for, you know, because she's an academic. And we don't want to get, you know, when you're getting academic, you want to sort of do the John Calvin thing and sort of veil your emotions and not argue, you know, subjectively or with emotive, reasoning, and her. What was refreshing to me was the articulation of her struggle that she had with her fencing coach, and just that willingness to be that personable and open, in not only a book but with her students, and the way she communicated with us was something that legitimately helped me put me in a position like that.
But here's the thing, like the Kalam cosmological argument.
Right, she doesn't.
Everything has a beginning.
Yes.
Began exists, universe began exists, therefore,
Right.
yeah. You can go on YouTube, which I did, 20-year-olds could see through that argument, okay? YouTube text. She just was like, oh my God, well, I guess that answers that. I guess there's a God, wow. And
If it's a simple answer, can you give us a simple, like, one sentence answer to Kalam?
well, duh, I mean, before,
Duh.
before,
That's good. Time to get the answer. That's a book, Bill.
you know yourself with that Stephen Lowy said the cosmological constants and so forth before the beginning of the universe, you're got a whole new ball game. We're looking inside the universe that we live in, cause and effect.
Right.
When you look outside of the universe, you might be in a whole new ball game. And also, what?
How far do you go back?
Well, yeah, before time. Well, who knows? We live in time, so we don't know what the constants were.
I guess I got not to derail it from the cosmological argument, but I got the impression that this was a book about her experience being in academia and in the secular world and growing up, and in her experience of coming into Christianity based on these people that she met, and she's sharing her epiphanies and her feelings and her realizations. Right. That's what this book is. I don't know that she's making any. I don't know that she's attempting. I guess the question is, what is she attempting here, right?
Well, I know it's a conversion story, but like Ken, did you say, you said yourself you weren't convinced by her arguments, right?
Well, I mean, I didn't necessarily expect to be, but I'm not quite as negative as some of the other atheists here about her book. I actually enjoyed reading it. It's a different perspective, like you say, from a traditional apologetic, rational type approach. It's more of an effective. It's affective approach to reading her life. But I feel like I have a lack personally in terms of imagining things like Lord of the Rings. I get bored when I watch Lord of the Rings. That's anathema to most people.
Fiction's great because the fiction that she read in literature is a perfect segue into the fiction of Christianity, don't you think?
I envy her and others who have the ability to kind of imagine outside of just rational things.
See, I think that religious people have incredible imaginations. I mean,
no kidding. What were you going to say, Terry?
I was going to say, I kind of agree with what you said. It was kind of like these few things that happened, her conversations with her fencing, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh,
Right.
so that's what I've been missing all this time.
That's one of the questions that we
And
brought up,
and
that Bill
that's
brought
not
up in the interview.
I mean, that's not for us to judge why she did it that way, and it could just be that her writing style, and I was telling Ken, and I don't want to put you on the spot or whatever, but I'm halfway through Ken's book, and boy,
Whoa,
this was...
what a difference.
Yes, I mean, what you went through is so heartfelt that as a reader, you're just going,
And here's
oh
the
my
thing,
gosh.
we'll get to you. If she had had a warm, supportive, informative podcast like The Atheist Edge, she would still be an atheist. Am I right? There he is, yes. If she'd only had you, Jim. What were you going to say, Conrad?
Well, I was going to say, I've been to a lot of these sessions, and every time we talk about God acting in history or miracles or something, the objection is, well, that just defies all of the physical laws of science that we know. Okay, that's fine. But now we bring up the cosmological argument, and then your answer is to, well, that was before the physical laws of the universe, so who knows? So I got to say, I don't think that's an honest argument, because I think you're playing both sides there. Not you personally, but whoever takes that position.
But I guess my point is so is she laying forth an argument in the book, or is she simply telling us about her experience?
I think the book is a
more
story.
experience.
It's a
And
story.
she touches on those things, but she doesn't go into detail. Maybe it's because somebody mentioned the book would be too long if she goes into detail. Maybe she just wanted to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that happened is we tried to get her for an interview. She's really backed up right now on some projects. In fact, she's writing a chapter for your upcoming book.
That is
forthcoming.
correct. She is I'm still in touch with her infrequently, but she is writing a chapter, contributing a chapter to our Story of the Cosmos book that'll be out next summer. She's writing a chapter on J.R.R. Tolkien's Cosmology of Middle-earth.
So, but what we were able to do, if you read the story, you know that a major role was played by her fencing coach.
We're having a hard time hearing back here.
Okay.
Just a
Yeah,
reminder, if everybody would speak loudly.
Yeah, everybody needs to
Those of us
really.
way back in the peanut gallery.
Yeah, we're way in overflow back into the next county. So if we try to talk really loud and enunciate as much as possible, and I'll try to be an example of that. But anyway, we were unable to get Dr. Orway to be able to come on for our club. But we were able to make contact with her fencing coach. And you know, he plays a role in that. He's at University of California, San Diego, I think. And so Bill interviewed, we broke this interview into 4 short parts. And some of these questions are addressed. Like, was it just she heard this one argument and it was like, oh, that's interesting, I believe now. Or was there more details? That's some of the things that are going to be covered. So let's do this. Let's watch the first part of that interview. It's about 12 minutes. This is the long one right here. But this is Josh Runyon, who's the fencing coach and was the apologist, evangelist, whatever, that basically played such a role in Holly coming to Christianity. Let's watch that now.
Hello, I'm Bill Cluck with the Atheist Christian Book Club, and we're talking about Holly Ordway's book, Not God's Type. How she was an atheist and was later became a Christian and is now the chairman of the apologetics department at Houston Baptist. One of the people, or probably the primary person that was pivotal in her becoming a Christian, is with us today, Josh Runyon, who was nice enough to talk to us for a few minutes. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Bill.
Glad to have you with us. James has a question. When she was at UNC, some of her Christian friends or whatever, some Christians asked her to come to a volleyball game and then said, oh, by the way, we're going to be talking about Jesus afterwards. So his question is, what about their approach offended Holly?
Yeah, I remember her talking some about her experience there and with experience with Christians there. And I guess that her feeling was they sort of saw her as a means to an end, but weren't really interested in her as a person herself. So, yeah, so she was just, that made her feel uncomfortable, and unlike how our relationships sort of evolved, where it became more comfortable to talk.
Yeah, so what was it about you and your wife's relationship and some of the things that you did that, you know, obviously produced a positive impact?
Yeah, I think we just developed a really nice friendship before we had any sort of deeper conversations that went on. And you know, one of the ways you develop strong friendships is by having a mutual interest that you're pursuing together. You know, in our case, it was the sport of fencing. We were very involved in that. I was coaching her, and you know, my wife was involved. They would be fencing together all the time. So, we just, we were pursuing the same things together at a club. We also shared an interest in J.R.R. Tolkien, so that also helped.
Oh, did you? Wow. So you're a fan, huh?
I was a big, read it in high school and became a huge Tolkien fan for many years.
His other question, what basic principles can atheists and Christians apply to promote understanding and dialogue with, without compromising their worldviews?
Let's see. I think we can, I think if we come at each other with a shared respect in how we talk to each other, that goes a whole long way. And I mean, one of my themes is sort of, respect accomplishes a lot. So if we listen to each other carefully, I think we'll make good progress in being able to, interact with each
Well, it seems that you did listen to her and you did consider seriously her questions. And a lot of Christians, they lay out the four spiritual laws or so forth. And if they don't, agree to be a Christian, it's just like wipe the dust off your feet and they're done with them. I mean, you seem to have a much more long-term involved approach, with Holly.
Yeah, well, I am very interested in Christian apologetics. So I really think that there's a basis and reason for the Christian faith. And when you're dealing with somebody who's an atheist, I mean, that gives you something to share. Atheists are very reasonable people generally also. And so you have a common approach that you can you come at these big questions together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of atheists, we have a fellow named Jim Hall who has his own podcast called The Atheist Edge. And he says, Dr. Orway seems to be projecting her own views, experiences, and character traits as a former atheist unto all atheists universally. Do you share her blanket overgeneralized view of atheists?
I think first, in my experience with Holly, I never got that impression that she sort of generalized her views to the larger atheist population. She always just talked about things very personally with, great amount of introspection and self-awareness. And but I never was aware of her generalizing that out to the wider atheist community.
And did she have an outrage? Did she have atheist communities that she interacted with? That was one thing. I didn't hear her talk a lot about, her local atheist group or seeing stuff on a podcast or whatever. Do you remember?
I don't think she had like an atheist support group or something.
Yeah.
Which is a fairly new phenomena.
Uh-huh.
But she did. I mean, she went to school at
Chapel Hill.
Yeah, it was Chapel Hill, but then she was in Massachusetts, I think, for undergraduate.
So there were fellow skeptics, or.
Oh yeah, her experience was being surrounded by skeptics, and actually Chapel Hill was more the anomaly because she, in her educational environment, she I think rarely came across Christians.
I guess it's a good thing she didn't run into Bart Ehrman, or she would have never converted, right? He teaches at Chapel Hill.
Yes, yeah. I catch
Go ahead.
the reference.
Do you perceive us all talking about atheists to be aimlessly walking in darkness, hopelessly uncomfortable with the purposes and meaning we make for ourselves, unable to love?
Let's see. The unable to love part, I would strongly disagree with. I mean, in the statement you said, I think atheists have a tremendous capability to love, and I mean, I know quite a few atheists and agnostics, and they do an amazing job. I've seen of loving other people, caring for other people, doing acts of altruism. There was one person on our fencing team at UCSD who used to go to a camp that cares for people with cerebral palsy. He wasn't doing it for any sort of Christian, God-honoring motivation. He just did it because he thought here was people who. So as far as the unable to love, I wouldn't characterize that at all. Could you repeat the other part of your question, though?
Well, his whole point is, people view atheists, as just these unregenerate, terrible people that aren't capable of, honesty and human kindness or whatever,
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't. So as I said, I don't share that view at all. And I think you mentioned something about purpose and meaning.
Yeah, aimlessly walking in the darkness is what he said.
Yeah. So I think as far as purpose and meaning go, I think atheists do have purpose and meaning, but they come at it a different way than as a Christian theist might think of purpose and meaning. I mean, the atheists that I'm familiar with from the literature and things like this would what needs to happen is you need to make this sort of existential leap from a world that's sort of been created, or not, that has not been created, but exists in a state of random.
Yeah,
randomness.
James was talking about that, the Kierkegaardian leap into the darkness.
The Kierkegaard does a leap to faith, but I think atheists also make their own leap, but they make a leap to give meaning. So, I mean, Francis Schaeffer is sort of the person who explained this the best, sort of this two-story view of meaning, and that atheists will have to make a leap also to have a world with meaning. And they do it subjectively, and it's laid out by Nietzsche and things like that of how that's accomplished. But and how well you make that leap, and it sort of depends on how cheerfully you can live in a world like that.
Well, it's funny. I'm in another theology group, and one of the fellows who's a lawyer is a fencer. He loves fencing and does classical fencing. And I told him about how existentially, as an atheist, I can create my own meaning, and I don't need to be a obsequious sycophant to God. That I'm my own person. And he says, better to ring in hell than serve in heaven, actually. And I went, that is so funny, because it's from Milton's Paradise Lost, and it was such a good comeback. And I don't mind people having different views as long as they, can articulate them and have a good evidence to back it up. So I thought that was kind of funny. He's going to try to come to the meeting and read her book, by the way. Last one from Jim. Do you see us all as smug, arrogant, and gleefully jumping at any opportunity to mock believers?
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good question, because I can also say emphatically no. That's not been my experience with atheists. I mean, of course, I have the experience with Holly, which went in the direction that her book says. But the other thing I do, I mean, I'm very much an amateur apologist, but I do run a chapter of Ratio Christi at UC San Diego.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and we've done it very much as a let's get people together and let's just talk about big questions, and questions that they're very tangentially related to the God question or Christianity question, things like free will and souls and things such as that. And anyhow, it's getting a lot of the people who's end up coming to this over the years have been atheists. And
really?
They've been some of our best, most engaging members. Some of them have ended up on the organizational student leadership part of keeping the club going, and and they've just been great. And they've asked good questions. They're engaging. They're respectful, and it's worked out very well.
So it's been a positive thing. Great. Wow.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, it sounds very much like what you're doing there in Arlington.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Jim, did he satisfactorily answer?
I like his responses, and they are
Thank you.
night and day different to Dr. Ordway's responses.
Jim, I never, when I read the book, I didn't see any of that going in that direction.
You didn't? Okay.
But others did. Let me just say, others did, and I'm not questioning that.
She was still an atheist. She writes about 9/11. What did these people matter to me? Weren't thousands killed every year in automobile accidents also? Why should I even grieve for strangers? It worked, and I stopped caring. Name one atheist that has ever thought that way, and that's why I didn't get past the first chapter, and I was already thinking, I'm about to pull no true Scotsman on her. I'm about to say she was never a real atheist, because I don't know any non-believers that have ever thought that.
Could you just say she wasn't a very good atheist?
Oh, by the way, Doug,
I understand your point.
She represents us all wrong.
I understand the point.
The person I mentioned, Doug Weathers, is here tonight. Who is a fencer? Do you want to say anything about fencing?
Touche or anything?
I think there's part of the you have to understand fencing is a very minority sport in most places. It attracts the weird and
present company excluded.
The weird and the competitive. So it's like chess with a sword. And so I think it lends itself a lot of times to people who enjoy apologetics type debate, because that's also sort of a give and take back and forth, but with reason. And so I think that's.
Oh, before the meeting, I was talking to Jim, and I said, well, of course you know that humanity, especially atheists, are loathsome, horrible, totally dead in sin people who have no inclination to reach toward God. And I like the tea and tulip. And he goes, what's the tea and tulip? So Doug, being a Calvinist, can you explain to Jim what the tea and tulip is?
Literally, it means total depravity. And it has to do with the outlook that that you are, the scripture says that you are dead in sin. And so Calvin's idea was that dead people don't do things. They don't reach for God. They don't run to God. They are passive objects of grace. And so he said there's nothing in us that would make God want to save us. And because we are born in sin. And so the total depravity it has its benefits.
Really? Please explain.
Wow.
So,
Sorry.
When Christians are always shocked that the pastor runs off with the secretary and takes the funds and stuff, Calvinists are never shocked. We knew that was coming eventually anyway.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, I guess, so back to her book, right, and her, so she's not putting forward, she's just saying that this is how, it's a testimony, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a testimony.
But Jim felt that he was talking kind of marginalizing all atheists. Did you guys feel marginalized?
Yeah, she does say, and quote, atheism, not just her own atheism as a whole, when consistently lived out, leads to self-deception and despair. Self-constructed meaning is only a stopgap.
What does it mean to consistently live out an atheist as an atheist? What does that mean?
Well, I've encountered numerous Christians who think that atheism is necessarily leading to nihilism because there is no afterlife. Anything that we do, even if it lives on for a couple of generations, the eventual heat death of the universe will render all our worldly efforts irrelevant. And I can see where in some people that can lead to nihilism. I just reject the notion that that is the only possible destination for atheism to go.
Let me address that. Jim, I didn't see it when I read the book, but then when looking back on it, hearing your questions and others as well, I don't know that she was purposely trying to say that I represent the atheist community, or that every atheist thinks the same way I do. I think she was telling her personal story, and was very courageous in at least some of the stuff that she was revealing to the audience. At the same time, I could see how the implication was, well, all atheists have despair. All atheists have that view of 9/11 or what have you, although I don't think she was trying to say that. But that does bring up this bigger question that a lot of you have addressed. Just kind of what's your thoughts on this? Is atheism a pessimistic worldview? Let's just start with the basic.
Go ahead, Steve.
I don't think so. I kind of want to touch on the meaning. She writes, increasingly the view is clear. If life has no meaning, then our actions cannot themselves have any meaning either. Now that statement sounds like she's speaking not just about herself, but everybody. And I take objection to that because your life can have meaning without a God. There's other humans in your life. You're
Make a good analogy, maybe ask the question better. I'm not addressing is it true or not. If there's two worldviews, one worldview is that my doctor's giving me 1 week to live. My other worldview is that I'm in perfect health. well, which is the more positive worldview? I mean, negative versus positive. Being true or false is a totally different issue. But that said, if I have, my doctor says I have a week to live, I guess I could choose to make this the best 7 days of my, possible that anybody's ever had. I can, choose to just try to take that leap of faith and say, I'm going to make this the best 7 days. But intrinsically, I think it is negative. I mean, to have 7 days to live is kind of a negative message. So it's back to that intrinsic.
He had something to say. What were you going to say?
I'd like to make a point that I hear a lot of theists, especially Christians, say that atheism is a worldview. And I think what they're doing is they're comparing different categories, different levels. She had a worldview, and it was atheistic, but atheism is not a worldview in the same way that theism is not a worldview. A Hindu is a theist, a Muslim is a theist, a Zoroastrian is a theist, and a Christian is a theist. But you can't say there's a theism is not a worldview, because you could take a Manichaeist who believes that the world is created by a demiurge and it's evil because matter is evil and spirit is good. You can say that, well, theism, it means that everyone hates matter and they think it's evil. So communism, Marxist-Lenin, is an atheistic worldview, but you're comparing two different categories.
So it's humanism.
Theism is to atheism a broad category under which is a lot of different worldviews.
This is like a trope in so many books and sermons. Whenever the atheist is brought up, it's a character, right? Just like Donald Trump is a character. Right. He's playing this character that happens to line up perfectly with real life, right? So there's this atheist character who spends all their time atheisting. Right? But the truth is that if you're an atheist, you could spend 0% of your time atheisting. You could be completely absorbed in all sorts of other things in life. For example, I'm completely absorbed in Finnegan's Wake. Right? This book that I always say is my Bible. That makes me a heretic, I would suspect, of some sort. But it doesn't have anything at all to do with the fact that I don't believe in God, except for that allows me this.
So the Bible says all of our righteousness is as filthy rags. It's just so. Okay. Even on your best day as an atheist, even if you do, like Julio was saying, he did something nice for someone with cancer, cleaned up her bathroom, and he didn't seem to have any self-aggrandizement. But what Doug said was that he still wants to pat his back, and he still has some pride. It's not
just
totally
talking about atheist good works.
Yeah,
we're talking about Christian good works too.
Can I finish I was halfway through. I didn't read her book, but I read an interview online that she did explaining all this in a nutshell. And she went over that. And my impression of her is that she was an atheist, but she was the sort of nihilistic atheist that goes into despair. And someone who's in that worldview, they'll naturally, no fault on her, they're going to project that. Because she's never come across like an existentialist, like a Sartre or a Nietzsche. If you get below the surface, they're not pessimistic. They think that you should take your freedom to make your own meaning and do it and be positive. So they're not despairing. They're throwing off the shackles of the old way and grabbing the reins of their own life and charting their own course. That's the opposite of a despairing nihilist. But they're all atheists. So it's easy for
Nietzsche was a nihilist, though, right?
He's an existentialist.
Well, there are different kinds of nihilists. Specifically, nihilists believe is that there's no external values. There's no ultimate meaning, but it doesn't mean that you can't have real meaning in your own life that you make for yourself. Now, a pessimistic nihilist, well, everything is worthless. Everything is and that leads to despair. But a positive, optimistic nihilist would say that no one can tell me what it means. I choose it myself, and I'm going to go that way.
Jim, can I ask you a personal question?
So anyway, Christians, a lot of Christians they gloss over that subtly. It's like they gloss over the subtleties of a lot of religions.
Well, I think you're glossing over making your own meaning. I mean, what does that even mean?
Well,
if there's no meaning, but you just make it up, then not meaningful.
I'm saying there are different interpretations. If you read the different philosophers, atheism doesn't always lead to nihilism, and nihilism doesn't always lead to despair. In her case, it did, and so.
And I see your point. She might be whispering.
Well, Jim, you have a personal question, and do you ever find yourself headed or in the direction of nihilism?
Well, I am an existential nihilist, just like Nietzsche was. But that's not a bad thing. He brought it up perfectly. That was the great encapsulation of every non-believer here, I would suspect, is a positive nihilist. Or if they are a nihilist, they are positive about it. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here right now. You'd be at home, or you are already. Now, I will give you this. We all know the suicide rates among non-believers is higher. So that can lead, there are, just like he said again, there are those non-believers that do go down that path that Dr. Ordway talks about, but that is a minority. I would contend that that's a very small minority among the non-believer group.
But if something doesn't intrinsically have value, like life or the future or something like that, but you choose to give it, isn't it like Conrad said, isn't it like making it up? It doesn't have value, but I choose to say it does anyway.
Do I seem as happy as you are, James?
Yeah.
And I am. I genuinely am.
Yeah.
So your divine meaning that you ascribe and my self-prescribed meaning gives us the same amount of happiness. We both go outside and look at a full moon or the stars.
But happiness
is the
is
same amount of awe and wonder.
Yeah, but happiness doesn't mean it's true or false.
Can I add to that? I'm a naturalist. I believe that your deity that you believe in is made up too. So from my point of view, your sense of meaning is also made up because it depends on a made up.
Wow, I understand your point.
That brings me to a sort of a tangent. When you're talking to the Muslim, he has a different objective deity that he attaches his meaning to. You see it as false. Is his meaning real or is it an illusion? His sense of meaning. Is it real?
It would be false. It would be false.
See, that's
but whether it makes him happy or not does not, or me either. Whether I'm happy about it or not has no relevance on whether it's true.
My point is that you can see his belief in objective morality is an illusion, and I can see the same thing.
Yeah.
So, Chris, are you despairing and hopeless and?
I'll be perfectly honest with the group. Like, this is like the idea of meaning and purpose is probably the #1 challenge that I'm probably still reckoning with right now, going from theism to atheism, because it's really nice knowing there's a grandiose purpose preordained from before you're even born, and to come to the conclusion that maybe that's not the case. It's challenging for sure, but to James' point, to Conrad's point, just putting it out there, because I obviously am not an expert in this field. What if it's not a matter of making up your own meaning? Like, you decide that you're going to find meaning in sandwiches every day, and you try and force it to happen. What if it's a matter of finding meaning in other things in life, activities that may not involve religion?
That would be a huge difference, because you're implying there's intrinsic meaning and value there. That you're just discovering what's already there. But so that's a huge difference between I'm going to create my own meaning.
Right, that's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
If I can just come to Holly's defense on this whole atheism debate, as a student of hers, I was introduced to a huge compendium of atheist literature. Enormous. More than I could read. We had to read a ton of stuff from her course, and in addition, there were all the rabbit trails of you can read this, and you can read that, and you can read this. Her engagement with atheism is all-encompassing, from old to new. Bertrand Russell, I read The Stranger, Albert Camus. We read atheism until I felt like, dang, what am I doing? So let me. So to sort of backfill what we're talking about here, that I know that Holly's perspective on atheism is all-encompassing in terms of maybe not in terms of as she was coming to Christ, but the exposure that she gave and the compassion that she extended to people in that are unbelievers was extremely thorough. I can assure you that it wasn't like picking and choosing, and she was telling us that all atheists are meaningless. I remember several nights struggling through The Portable Atheist and going, oh my gosh, all I'm saying is that what I think when we're talking about meaning, one of the things that she taught me, and that opened, at least through what she taught, opened my eyes to the fact that atheism as a, whether you want to call it a worldview or a broader perspective of things, number one, without God, you do live in accordance to that reality, if that is a final reality to what you believe. So if you convince a Christian that there is no God, then you turn right around and say, well, now you have the ability to make up your own meaning. But if you think we're already making up our own meaning, there's no reason to attack Christianity as false. That is what she taught me, was at least her perspective on what meaninglessness was. If you're going to take away Christianity from me and give me something else, you might as well allow me to keep Christianity instead of going after it and saying it's likely not true.
Okay. So I guess here's my thoughts on that is, so I'm an atheist,
right.
and I was raised. It's my little speech. So I was raised in the PC.
You need to speak up because we can't hear you back there.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm an atheist, and I was raised in a Presbyterian church. Right. What do I talk to?
Just say it loud.
Oh, right.
You're fine. Just keep talking loud.
So yeah, I was raised in the Presbyterian church, and and that was a very liberal, I would say secular, very secular church. And my experience today as an atheist is not really different from my experience then. When I was a child, I thought this was all really beautiful and nice, and they were singing, but I never, even as they would, for example, sing to God, right? You know, glory be to the Father, all this. I never thought anybody really believed it, and I didn't believe it either. And so that was my atheist experience as a child. And then when I went to the godless liberal college, then
Baylor.
I graduated from Louisiana Scholars College, so in Natchitoches, Louisiana, at Northwestern State.
Strike.
So actually, it was years later. It wasn't when I was in college. But at some point, I read Dawkins. Right, I read his book.
Strike three.
I read his book, and it made sense to. It all made sense to me, and it was nice to have this other person say the things I thought, and that's the entirety really of my atheist experience. And I felt no need to read any other atheist books, compendiums, things. I really don't care what the Four Horsemen have to say. I enjoyed reading Hitchens. Ironically, more about things other than atheism. For me, atheism it's like a tiny little. It's just a fact of my life, but it's not something that drives me. It's not something that keeps me up at night. And I am driven, and things do keep me up at night. And it's never, ever, ever atheism.
Mm.
Wow.
That's thanks for sharing that with us. It's a good discussion so far. I do want to get our second interview in. You want to say something, Cindy?
You were saying that it's important to know which is true. And she brings up C.S. Lewis, the argument from desire. Mm-hmm. If you desire something, that means it has to exist. And I do believe that there's an appeal to believe someone is looking out for us. However, that does nothing to change reality. So I obviously don't believe that there's somebody.
The argument from desire, I may not say it exactly right, and I don't know if Lewis was the one, somebody can correct me. I don't know if he was the one who came up with that. But the idea is that every need that we sense in the natural world has a way of being fulfilled, or you wouldn't have that. You're hungry, that's because there's such a thing as food. You're sleepy, that's because there's such a thing as sleep. So there's this, what he said, pervasive throughout all cultures, this feeling that it's wrong for you to live 70 years and be gone, and that there's this yearning for eternity. Now, it could be wish fulfillment, it could be a lot of other things. I don't think he was trying to say it proves it's true. I think he's just saying that could be an evidence that it might be real. With the fact that there's this universal.
I don't feel that. I don't feel a yearning for eternity. I mean, what is that? What is that like inside my brain? What is a yearning?
It's
I wake
like,
up and I go, I yearn for eternity.
On April 15th, when my heart stopped for 2 minutes, when I came to, I had a yearning for eternity. I felt like I'm ready to die, but not today.
Yeah, still got work to do.
Whether you personally feel it or not, I think the existence of religion all around the world shows that vast majority of humans feel it. True or false, it's that's a reality of human existence.
Well, I think that people connect with it, that's for sure. But it's
a
not
safety
something
net.
that,
Yeah.
you know,
It's a safety net for your
it's
life.
not something I think about.
Yes.
So I could put this out there. The issue with whether I make my own meaning or whether there's a greater meaning that has some transcendental nature to it, it becomes a problem where the atheistic view that you can make your own meaning would blind you to the truth of reality. Because if I become my own meaning and my own God, okay, I can't observe the whole nature and the structure and all the intelligibility that exists and give myself up to that understanding, because I have to stand on my own grounds. So in that sense, you become blind to this.
Well, and you have biblical support for that, because the noetic effects of sin, are you familiar with that? Being, again, the tea and the tulip, you're totally depraved as a non-believer that you can't even think rationally because your reasoning is fallen, just like your will and your sinful nature.
The imago Dei, the image of God, doesn't mean what is usually meant by that is it's marred. It doesn't mean it's disappeared. So we can still reason, but the reasoning can be flawed. It doesn't mean we have no ability to reason. So we still bear, all of us, atheists or humans, atheists or Christians, we bear the image of God as humans.
Wow. But we are. But you agree, Brian? You're right. We can reason, but spiritually we are unable to reason, and we're unable to reach toward God unless He initiates the.
Let me say, we have a Facebook Live audience, and I think we may have a question coming in from our Facebook Live
This
audience.
might be a good way to wrap up the first half too. It's a statement. It's just a comment on what we're talking about right now. It's from Peggy. I think it is interesting that whether you are atheist or Christian, everyone wants to feel that there's a purpose in life. As Christians, our purpose is to live a Christ-centered life and try to be as Christ-like as possible. But as an atheist, you are still wanting to live a purpose-filled life.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Let's do this. Let's watch, before we take our break, let's watch this second interview. It's about 9 minutes, and this is Bill Cluck interviewing Josh Runyon, the fencing coach of Holly Ordway.
Well, I mean, what's amazing is you seem to be making, like the movie, all the right moves. I mean, you just seem to be the perfect person for her to come to faith. And it's just... What do you think of her turn to Catholicism when she, especially... Well, one of the things, like when I read her book, you gave her the column cosmological argument. You know, how everything has a beginning, exists has a beginning, the universe had a beginning, so therefore there's probably a cause behind the universe. And one of the problems that some of the atheists have is they felt that she really didn't look at Lawrence Krauss and Sean Carroll and the other alternatives to that argument. She kind of just bought into it. And I know she said she turned it inside out and, really, studied it. But do you feel she really looked at the evidence hard and looked at the other alternatives? Or do you think she just kind of, took it on faith or whatever?
Yeah. I can give you kind of a long answer to that question, because it touches on sort of the beginning part of our conversation about theism together, and sort of the part I remember the best. I actually went in, getting ready for the interview, I dug out the first book that we sort of went through together.
Oh, let's see it.
So it's this: Does God Exist?
Mm-hmm.
And
A.P. Moreland, yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of a actually, I don't know if they had it in person or they did it the whole thing. I don't know whether it was transcribed or it was just a written debate. But it's J.P. Moreland and Kai Nielsen. And our first discussions was the things I'd give her to read were, I didn't want to just build a straw man argument for her. One, it wouldn't work with Holly because she's too sharp, and she see that right away. So this actually has Kai Nielsen was a pretty good proponent of atheism, and also it had a chapter by Anthony Flew on it, and this is of course before Anthony Flew became
right. We've read one of his books, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And anyhow, so she got to hear both sides. Now, as far as the Kalam argument does come up in this book, and but Kai Nielsen doesn't, and Anthony Flew, they address it somewhat, and they do a little bit of appeal to experts, but they approach it more as a philosophical side. And if you're familiar with the Kalam cosmology argument, it has two premises. One, so as Holly has sort of looked at this, and this is my recollection, this all happened about 12 years ago, but Holly looked at this. The first premise is anything that begins to exist has a cause. I don't recall her ever having really a problem with that. She sort of thought that was sort of self-evident. The second premise, though, is the universe begins to exist. There are two sides. There's two arguments that are usually given in support of this. One is sort of a scientific argument based on Big Bang cosmology, and in there, people like Sean Carroll and Lawrence Krauss, they've weighed in heavily, and there's a big debate going on that. The other side of the other support of it is a philosophical support, and really we spent most of our time on the philosophical side. Which I thought was good, because the scientific side often it becomes a battle of dueling experts and people are quoting each other and things like that. The philosophical side, we both have, you can sort of reason to without a lot of expertise. So we approached it more philosophically, looking at talking a lot about infinites, whether there can be actual infinites, and then you reason, as because I'm sure your group has discussed the Kalam argument. But on the philosophical side, you reason from the inability for there to be actual infinites, therefore time cannot be, can't be actual infinite.
There's excellent scientific evidence for the Big Bang, beginning with the guys at Bell Laboratory that, discovered the microwave background radiation. But here's what's a little problematic for me is she goes, no more dallying. She becomes, a believer in God. Then she says, no more dallying around with, deism. I'm going straight to Christianity, because you gave her a Christian book to read. What was that book? By N.T. Wright.
Yeah, so actually, if you want to go through the thing, before we went to N.T. Wright, N.T. Wright talks about the resurrection. I think there's the really cool thing about how the whole conversation worked. It worked very structurally. We first discussed, does God exist, but sort of an Aristotelian God of an uncaused mover. And then we talked about the moral argument for God and the justification for that. And so it sort of got to the point where we were looking at there's what we'd call, let's say, ethical monotheism. And then when you shift to the next sort of part, the first thing is, before you look at like the resurrection, which is what N.T. Wright talks about, is to talk about miracles. So this is the next book that we talked about, or that we engaged with. And it's The Defense of Miracles. And this also has people from the other side. It has the essay by David Hume in it. And then Anthony Flew also does a piece in it. And this was I really, actually, I thought one of the strongest atheist arguments I read was Anthony Flew's thing, and where he gives sort of his invisible gardener argument. So she got, again, not a straw man of, an argument against miracles, but then they have several people building up cases, for it's reasonable to believe in miracles. And so we did that, which I think is an important step before you jump right into the resurrection.
So how long did it take when she read that book before she was converted?
Well, so the book on miracles just was a precursor then to reading N.T. Wright's book. And so this is N.T. Wright's book, and she does mention how thick it is.
That
and
700-page monster,
and,
yeah.
and
She
small
said she
print.
read it. Okay.
And I mean, I was just actually blown away that she actually read this thing because, it is massive. And I don't, yeah. But it really showed her, intellectual curiosity in. So N.T. Wright sort of lays out the whole case for, the historical reliability of the resurrection of Jesus. And so at the end of that is where she became, I mean, there's some other conversations about, what is the nature of faith and things like that. But it was sort of the end of N.T. Wright's book that she became ready.
So were you surprised when she said, "I'm a Christian"?
Yes. I mean, I surprised, I don't know if that's the right word. I sort of marveled at the whole thing, how the whole thing sort of came about. I mean, because it just, I mean, it was very, I don't know. To me, it seemed very providentially driven.
Ooh. And that's when the question I'm just dying to ask you is, I used to be a Christian, and I was always, a little torn. How much is God's part? How much is my part? Should I just rely on God and then not care? I mean, what do you think of that? God's sovereignty, how much does that play, and how much do you, because obviously you were an effective witness for Christ, how much of the part did you play?
I don't know. I mean, those are sort of unknowable questions. How it all works together. I mean, in my mind, my role was actually pretty small. It was, again, I try not to drop into Christian lingo.
Right, that's okay. I mean, most
mixed argument, but our very mixed group. But in my mind, it was the Holy Spirit was very much involved in what was what was going on.
Right.
But if you ask me for my my personal view, I mean, I'm very much believe in free will and that's part of the decision.
So you're not like a Calvinist who believes it's all God. He initiates even the act of faith, that it's not anything to do with the person.
No, I'm not. I'm very much persuaded by like William Lane's Craig Molinist view.
Okay.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go into a break in just a second. We'll be back in 15 minutes, and what we're going to do when we come back, we're going to talk about next month's book. We have 2 more parts of the interview, and we want to get to the bottom of this. Is atheism a pessimistic worldview? I can't wait to find the answer to that. And so let's do that. The restroom for the new people is down the hall on the left, and then I think there's some food left as well if you want to grab something real quick. Thank you.
Dan.
Excuse me.
right? So it's like,
Well, welcome back.
2019 one.
Welcome back to the Atheist Christian Book Club. Hope you enjoyed the break. We want to finish up. We've got two more much shorter interviews that we want to get to part 3 and part 4. But before we go to the next interview of Josh, Bill wanted to share something with you.
Well, I was talking to Cindy during the break, and she said something that was kind of fun and exciting to me. She said that, well, God wanted to write the Bible. Why couldn't he have done it in a more clearer way that I could have done it? And she goes, wait a minute, that's my human depraved mind talking. So Todd, there is hope.
I've reached one.
You've reached your goal. So Todd, Todd has his own theology group. He's been doing it for 15 years, and he's talked to tons of atheists, the whole spectrum of atheists. Do you think Holly was a fundamentalist atheist, or was he a more open-minded atheist? What do you?
I mean, I've met Cindy once, and I enjoyed the conversation, and she didn't strike me as a fundamentalist atheist.
How about Holly?
Oh, Holly.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I've never met Holly.
Okay. But what do you think of atheists? Do you think in general they're kind of closed-minded, fundamentalist type atheists, or?
Well, I mean, there are different categories of atheists.
Okay.
There are atheists that, like, their whole life is atheism. They're built around something they don't believe in. And then
backslidden atheists.
There's atheists that just don't care, which I figure if I were an atheist, if I didn't believe in God, I'd just sleep late on Sundays and get on with my life, and
There you go.
that would be
Kind
it.
of a great
Yeah, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
Just
You got
like,
it. That's how you do it.
you're not joining all these organizations and
Right.
Being a militant
Yeah.
atheist.
Right.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Cindy.
I think the reason why we need to speak about our atheism is because the damage that religion does. It's not
well,
because
okay, what
I don't-
damage? I mean, are we talking about separation of church and
Save yourself,
state?
Cindy.
Oh. Yeah, I know.
No,
Like, see,
Damn
this
it.
is the thing.
Believing that we're totally depraved, that's one.
So you're
That's
going
one right
to
there.
You
change
just
our
admitted
mind
you were-
and evaluate.
No, but other people that are questioning and going through the same thing I went through, I want them to know it's okay to question, it's okay to not believe.
Okay.
Because like I think I said that one time I was there, I was relieved when I became an atheist. Because I realized it wasn't me that was screwed up, it was religion. I'm sorry, that's a little...
Is that your depraved mind talking against Cindy?
I guess
Because
it
it sure
is.
sounds
I
like
guess it is.
Ron, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I listened to several of Holly's interviews, and she describes herself as being just completely indifferent. Is ambivalent the right word, perhaps, in her atheism as a child growing up, and then she only became a bit angry when she ran into the Bible beaters down at Chapel Hill. And then she became a more militant atheist, as she described it.
Almost self-defense,
Not
maybe?
terribly, but somewhat more aggressive in her atheism. And then I got the impression that this whole process of transition took her a long time to process.
Yeah, but I was talking to Terry during the break, and she was saying, you were just saying it yourself about how she was going by feelings and inclusiveness.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't talk a lot about having much in her life prior to coming to this. She didn't talk about family or children or hobbies or anything that had her interest. So we meet the fencing guy, and he pays her attention, and she kind of locks onto that. And what's the common in the fencing club, what's the big thing? They're all Christians. So now
I don't know all of them are, but the leaders
all right,
are.
but they're
Yes.
okay. The leaders,
But the people that are giving her the
They're-
right hand of fellowship, which
Yes.
means Julio.
Does that go back to your question, Bill, about did you have a support group among
Yeah, and-
atheists?
and she, and
But
so
in the
she-
Catholic, by the sea.
Yes. Okay. So now she has a group of people that she can relate to, and they're interested in her, and they're helping nourish her along, and that's what
Absolutely, you hit it on the head. Now, Holly, this is the Catholic by the sea, the priest. You're going to have to go get a saint. Okay, well, I can live with that. You're going to have to pray to Mary and look at her just almost equal with Jesus. She goes, oh, now you got me. Well, okay, whatever it takes.
Reading that in the book.
Yeah, that came 6 years later.
So what
Okay.
Catholic thing.
But it's still, she's buying into whatever they're selling.
Yeah, it was kind of like, so Todd and the fencing group, they got me this far. Well, I'm gonna show them, I'm gonna one up it. I'm gonna go a
All the
little
way.
bit further.
Right.
And as you were saying,
she's very competitive then.
Right.
Yes.
And as you were saying,
Yes.
she's even bought into transubstantiation,
Yes.
which you Protestants know is nuts. That Jesus blood, it's his literal blood.
So what's this? There's not,
That came 6 years later. That came after
let
all
me
the
say
things
this.
we were talking
There's
about.
not been a Christian author that we've read in the book club that I agree with 100%.
Right.
I'm the
So
only
what-
one in the
what-
whole room with all my
What
theology
religion?
correct.
What
So that said,
She's
let me make a parallel. Okay, I don't, I'm not
Catholic.
Catholic. I don't believe in
No,
transubstantiation or consubstantiation.
So-
But at the same time, it doesn't mean that I can't find value in that book. And so let me give you an example. How many of us were? How many of us were here for the book on free will? Okay, by whom?
Sam Harris.
Sam Harris. How many of you agreed with Sam Harris about free will? A couple, okay. Now, does that mean we can get no value from anything Sam Harris writes? Or can you find value even if you don't agree with all of his propositions?
But this is so egregious. When I went to Jerry Falwell's church, I mean, that's how hardcore Christian
Oh my
I was.
gosh.
Yes! And
That
Ed
explains a lot.
Do you know what he said? As Christians, real Christians, we knew that Catholics weren't Christians. They needed to be evangelized. And Ed Henson, I can still remember it, Jerry Falwell's church said, they're no better than pagan idolaters.
Well, now you asked in the I think the last interview, you asked in a much more polite way. You asked that question of Josh,
Right, right.
And so we'll get to that in a little bit. Before we go to that, the next interview, though, I did want to take a moment to talk about what our next book's going to be. Our next book's going to be Why I Believed. Reflections of a Former Missionary. This is somebody you may have heard of, maybe around here somewhere. Ken Daniels. Ken is one of our, almost from day one. You've been about a year in the club, haven't you?
And that was March of this year.
March of this year. Okay, so it seems like longer.
I've been here every time.
You've been here every time, so a regular. He's written a book. You wrote it how long ago, Ken?
2009.
2009. You're going to love the price. It's 99 cents on Kindle or free on his website. And we're going to be looking at that on September 7th. And it's a story of a Wycliffe missionary. And I've read about the first 3 chapters already, so I've got a head start on it. And it is a very easy to read, and you will be drawn in. And he's talking a lot about factual stuff, but he's also talking about you can understand what it felt like to be going through these questions and doubts. And I think it would be fair to say, Ken really wanted to come out of this as a Christian believer initially, but he didn't, and he is an atheist now. We want to hear more of that story. We want to read that book, and so I will send you out a link to be able to go to the website and get it. But it's Why I Believe by Ken Daniels. Now, let me say the book is very, very thorough and lengthy. How long is it, Ken? You remember?
378, I think, pages.
I know some of you, like Kevin, for example, that's like one afternoon read and you're caught up with it. A lot of us would struggle trying to get through all the books we're reading already, and so a lengthy book like that. But I'm more concerned about when we do these more in-depth books, do we really have time to even discuss all the stuff that was in it? So it's like you write all these notes and you have all these things. Well, we never got to the last 5 chapters, really. And so what do you guys think about taking his book and just doing half of the book now, and then we save the other half for maybe next year or down the road? We can decide that later.
Is it divided in a way where that would make sense?
There are 2 parts. So
There you go.
the first part is a little shorter than the second, but I would say if you want to read chapters 1 through 6, there's 16 chapters. The first chapters are longer than the
Would we get into any of the meat, or are we just getting background? I've read the first
chapter
3.
6 is pretty much meat.
Okay.
And well, there's meat in the.
Well, and you could maybe do the resurrection chapter, which is phenomenal. And let me tell you, this guy has insight. I mean, I do this stuff all the time, and I got new insights, which was fantastic. And did you just have nothing to do in Africa? Is that where you read Dale House and these heavy-duty scholars?
Well, it was really, I wasn't doing any reading of secular literature out there, mostly just reading the Bible. And that's where I started to, have my doubts. I did, when the internet became available, I was able to download a skeptical art, actually by a liberal Christian, because I was having doubts and I was looking.
That's where the slippery slope began.
Yeah, I was Googling some of the questions I had, and up comes this liberal author, and I kind of, with trepidation, start reading.
They're like the Catholics.
Yeah.
Just a little different.
But speaking of the Bible, it brings me to a point Holly made that this isn't a capricious God. This is a reasonable God who created the Logos, who's just got everything together. Oh, really, Holly? God with Noah saying, boy, I wish I never, made man. Boy, I regret that. That was a big mistake. That doesn't sound capricious. In Numbers. Oh, kill all the men, the goats, the sheep. What did they do? The women. But if there's any that haven't been with men, let's keep those for yourself. That's not a capricious God. Not to mention Jesus with the fig tree. Wasn't even the season for figs, saying, curse you. I mean, what type of, is that not the very definition of capriciousness?
Makes you feel sorry for fig tree. Well, let's do this.
I will say, my wife, when she found out that this was going to be happening, she said, "Well, I'd like to come." So she's
wow!
We'd
love to see her.
Right.
Now,
she's a believing Christian, so
okay. If I was in your shoes, I don't know if that would make me feel better or worse. But yeah, we appreciate that she could be here. That's going to be great. So let's do this. Let's go. We're going to go back and talk about the Dr. Holly Ordwaite's book, Not God's Type. And we want to go back to this third interview or third part of the interview that Bill Cluck did with Holly's fencing coach and Josh. So you ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, what's amazing is you seem to be making, like the movie, all the right. What do you think of her turn to Catholicism when she, especially this kind of was probably. Hello, I'm Bill Cluck with the Atheist Christian Book Club, and we're talking about what do you think of her turn to Catholicism when she, especially this kind of was problematic for me, that she said, oh, this Mary thing, I don't know if I can go there. And then she seems to have swallowed the Catholic thing hook, line, and sinker. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I'm very much of a mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis's mere Christianity type view of the whole thing. So I'm just delighted for her if that's where she finds, her deepest meaning in her Christian walk. I mean, I'm not a Catholic, so there's theological differences, and that's one of the interesting things about the whole Christian endeavor. I mean, the questions never stop, and you alluded to Calvinism, all sorts of theological questions that sort of swirl around, and that you get to continually deal with, and once you become a Christian. So I was I guess a little surprised that when she became a Catholic, but I'm really happy for her. That's where she finds her home.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So do you talk to her now, or do y'all have discussions now?
We've once she moved to Houston Baptist, we quit communicating all that much. I exchanged a couple times. We've exchanged some email type correspondence, but we aren't in regular contact at all.
Oh. So do you now go to a evangelical church or a non-denominational church, or what's your?
Yes, yeah, I'm one of those even non-denominational evangelicals.
Mm-hmm.
Though I have, we could talk about theological distinctions all day long, and I'd enjoy the conversation, but
right.
But that's where I call my church home. Yes.
Here's one from a girl, Cindy Forish, in our group, and she says, in chapter 3, Holly speaks of having a lot of darkness in her life. would you agree that's not necessarily a part of an atheist's life, nor is it necessarily not a part of a believer's life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can't speak for Holly. I mean, I'll let Holly speak for herself, what she does in chapter 3. I mean, when I met her, and early in our relationship, she very much came across as a very confident in herself and what she believed in, all that. Later on, as we shared a little bit deeper, I just found her to be an amazingly introspective person. So as far as thinking about whether that's what atheists are, like I sort of said before, no, I don't think atheists are like that at all, or not necessarily like that. But again, they have to sort of make a leap from a world that has no meaning into creating meaning. So I think it is hard to be happy and not have your dark moments in a world without meaning. Also, the question is very psychological. So Christians, a lot of Christians can have dark times, dark moments, and because it'd be nice if our worldview answered all our questions or just solved our emotional concerns, but our life's not quite that easy.
Well, I mean, the Calvinist view is that you're totally depraved, the tea and the tulip, that there's nothing that makes you want to reach out to God, that you're spiritually dead, you're just utterly worthless and wicked. I mean, that view, right? But you don't agree with that. You believe that atheists can do good things, can be, have...
Well, so I'm like a one-point Calvinist, and that would be the point that I actually agree on. And it's not that atheists are totally deprived. I mean, we're all totally deprived. But if you talk to Calvinists, they don't say that means you're as bad as you could be or anything like that. That just means, we're in a state that we need God, and to have that relationship with God, God makes the first overture is my thing. But then the Calvinists,
so God does initiate the faith. Right.
Yeah, so I believe that God initiates that, and I believe that He initiates it for everybody, including you, Bill, and everybody like that, and and part of your group. But okay, well, that's, I think.
So James said also. So did Holly get it wrong, or is atheism a pessimistic worldview?
Let's see. I mean, I hate to answer things for atheists. I'll let atheists answer for themselves. I mean, some atheists have written extensively about it actually being a pessimistic worldview, but other atheists would deny that. Again, like one of the things William Lane Craig talks about is being happy and consistent as an atheist. And so I think, and he says you can be happy, but you can't be consistent. But if you're consistent, you probably won't be happy. And I just feel, in my worldview, there's a lot of validity to that.
Mm-hmm. So, in my view, Christianity is more confirmation bias. We tend to confirm our own biases and not look at critical evidence, from the other side. And special pleading, our religion's right. Jesus walked on water, but it's absurd to think that Muhammad went on a winged horse to the moon or wherever he went. So can you see that like in Holly's case especially, she had this support group you could see it with that Catholic church she went to by the sea. There was a welcoming, loving group that she was just confirming, her own biases, and she just had that culture that we live in, a Christian culture that some people say we're swimming in it, where we have all this bias for Christianity. So that's what I'm saying. Do you think that had a big part in it, that she really wasn't looking at things objectively?
No, for her, she was coming at it from a very, all her educational background, which strongly supported her and she very much thought of herself in associated herself with her educational background. All of that was non-Christian, atheistic, and really until she, did the steps that she's laid out in her book of conversations and reading, that she sort of changed. And there wasn't a big Christian network that she was involved in then. I mean, it was, mostly, my family. But that would be about, we had other non-Christians at the fencing club and things like that she also interacted with. And so it wasn't, again, it wasn't any sort of peer pressure thing or anything like that going on. I mean, it really was, I think, as she affirms, it was a quest she was on for truth, and it led her to where it led her.
Let's go, James.
Okay, well, we're back after the video, so did that resolve any of the...
Yes, Terry, how do you feel about your meaningless, depressive, pessimistic atheist life?
Actually, I'm an extremely happy person.
Really?
And I feel that I find meaning in lots of things that I do. And it doesn't involve praying to, I think it was Jim that did I think it was the cartoon that said, "Dear God, I'm upset. My 7-year-old is still talking to his imaginary friend." and so I kind of feel that I'm pretty good.
How about you, Cindy? How about your depressing life as an atheist?
Pretty much the same. I mean, unlike him, I'm not saying that it's wrong to go through that questioning period of not having a meaning or whatever. I didn't struggle with that when I became an atheist. I just decided, I was going to go forward with my life and find things to do like I was before, and find goals to achieve.
It
I
doesn't
think
give
part
me
of
a
the
lot
meaningless...
angst.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
I don't see what difference it makes. Okay, so I mean, if Christianity is more optimistic, that doesn't make it true.
Right,
and if
good point.
atheism is more pessimistic, or if it's more optimistic, that doesn't make it true. So, I mean, Mormonism, you can become a god, and that's pretty optimistic. So that doesn't make it true. So I don't understand why it matters one way or the other. I mean, it's clearly a benefit, but it doesn't.
I think part of the concern with our group was it seemed like she was unfairly, from their perspective, portraying atheism as always
dark
and leading to that. Now,
Well,
maybe that was just only her
experience.
where she saw herself in this. Now, just to back up and take the bigger picture, though, I don't think it's totally unfair if you look at it. Like I said, the idea of having eternity and having a purpose in life that's given to me, and that this life is not all, I'm not going to live another 10 or 15 years and be gone forever. This is more optimistic to me to think that there would be eternal life. Doesn't mean it's true. It just would be a more optimistic view, in my opinion.
But isn't it also kind of arrogant to think that, in a way? I mean, what's so wrong with saying, this is the life I have, and I'm going to do the best job I can do with the life that I have been given because I was born?
Well, it's back to my analogy, though. My doctor's saying I have no more than 7 days to live. That may be true, but a more optimistic prognosis would be to say, you're fully healthy, you could expect 10, 20, 30 more years. That's a more optimistic prognosis to me. So it doesn't mean that just because I have 7 days, I can't make the best possible 7 days that I can out of that, but it's still, just you put them next to each other, and one of them is a lot more pessimistic view.
So I was in Todd's Revelation class, and guess what you're going to be doing, Christians? For 24/7, this is what it says. By all day and all night, you worship God. It's like, how you have
You
praise.
should have stayed for the rest of the class.
You know how you have praise and worship at Mount?
Would you rather be in hell than be able to be in a heaven like
As
that?
I was leaving, Todd goes, guess what the alternative is?
What if the alternative is nothing? You're just gone.
Hey,
You've
John,
done your job.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, and I'm sorry, I forget your name?
Dan.
Dan, okay, so during the break, Dan and I had a little conversation about this book, and so maybe we could sort of recap some of the things that we talked about if you're up for that. It's
Sure.
not a trick or anything.
No, go right ahead, John.
Just talk loud so we all hear.
Okay, I'll talk loud. So I would say this is definitely So it sounds like this is a book about her experience, and she's writing in this literary tradition where you write a book about your experience, like Tolkien, did. We talked about Tolkien, right? So that's what she did, and that's a very Catholic thing to do, I think. And I there's a number of Catholic thinkers that I really enjoy reading and thinking about the stuff they do. But it's very different from the format of book that we're used to here, right? That there's a very specific sort of book that just fits perfectly in the atheist Christian debate, and this book is different. First of all, it's I would say perhaps a Catholic sort of book, but also it's more of it's sort of a lyrical experience, right? She's sharing a literary, it's a literary expression of what's going on in her head, which is different from the other books that we read.
We were talking about Holly's love of Tolkien and Lewis, especially the Narnia Chronicles when she was younger as a child, and that Not God's Type, in essence, is a kind of high compliment to something like what Lewis did with his spiritual autobiography, Surprised by Joy. In the spirit of the Inklings, about whom Holly is an incredible scholar in terms of the knowledge of those men and what they talked about, she, I think, in part, and I don't mean to speak for her entirely, but I know she admired that tradition so much that you can kind of approach Not God's Type as something like Lewis's Surprised by Joy.
Could you define for us the Inklings?
The Inklings. Tolkien and Lewis and Charles Williams and several other writers of that era would get together on a regular basis at a pub of the Eagle and the Child, and sometimes in the dorms at the college of Cambridge, Oxford, Cambridge, wherever they were at the time. But they would gather and talk about their writings, talk about manuscripts, and it was through the Inklings that Lewis encouraged Tolkien to finish The Lord of the Rings, and but Tolkien would not reciprocate and did not ever really enjoy Narnia, and thought that the Narnia stuff that Lewis was writing was just a mishmash, a hodgepodge. And I'm sorry, it just wouldn't do for old J.R.R. Tolkien. But Holly is she's a scholar of that time period, of those people, and I think in part, I wouldn't say the whole thing, but I think Not God's Type is somewhat similar to that. So yeah, John's right in the sense that this is not a Bill Craig syllogism book. This is not a philosophical foundation for Christian worldview. This is Holly Ordway coming to Christ and experiencing Christ as an individual, as someone created in the image of God, and this is her personal experience. And so yeah, it's not a rational, necessarily pure coming to Christ by the light of pure reason. This is not a book that you're going to find.
I recommend for you too. She's got online, YouTube or whatever. There's several lectures that she's done, and I think she's got a book in progress on this too. The idea of using fantasy genre as an apologetic.
Absolutely.
And the first reaction is, Bill says, yeah, of course it's a fantasy. So of course that's going to work well. That's not what she's talking about at all. But she does talk about a proper use of imagination and how that helps you to be a better thinker. So it's worth watching. I think it's about a 45-minute lecture on that, and I would recommend you look that up and watch it.
Yeah, if I may, James, the idea of imagination, I interviewed her colleague and my former professor, Michael Ward, on my podcast earlier this year, and Michael touched upon that very idea of clearing up the connotations that come along with fantasy. Theoretical physicist Roger Penrose, for example, believes that if we're going to make any headway in physics, that cosmologists, astrophysicists, and scientists have to think in terms of with the imagination, thinking redemptively about we're not going to solve the roadblocks in cosmology if we don't start thinking creatively. And that's how we got E equals MC squared and all of these other discoveries, is that we were thinking outside the box. And so there's a movement afoot to talk about our experiences through the realm of the imagination, and used properly, used wisely, used in conjunction with. It's not like reason has any more higher elevation in our cognitive toolbox than the imagination. We're always thinking imaginatively. That's what the scientific hypotheses often are the imagination of scientists. And so Holly and Michael would argue that there's truth in good literature that is, what we would call fiction, or maybe even fantasy. It opens our minds to a reality to which we can relate. I mean, we might think of movies this way. Our culture is a movie culture. So finding truth in these stories.
I confess that I'm one that's somewhat tone deaf in this area. I worked through every one of her poetic examples in the book and thought, I don't get it. I mean, I'm kind of like Jim, what you said about art. Remember that? I'm kind of with you, Jim, on that. But I consider it that's like being I'm colorblind or something. It's my problem, and maybe this is a whole area I need to look at myself and try to develop better.
Maybe she can bring you to understand the beauty of art.
Well, and
There you go.
One of her favorite poets is Gerard Manley Hopkins. She really talked a lot about him and really appreciated and helped me open my eyes to the beauty of his work. So there is a poetic aspect to her experience, and I resonate very much with it, having studied under her. But this idea of poetry and truth being communicated through literature, very powerful.
Yeah, I didn't read the book, like I said. I read a short interview that she did, and this may be the book, it may not be the book. But one of the reasons that one of the reasons why she said that she came to believe in Christ was that which I've heard many Christians before say, is that because of the story of the apostles and how they were before in the story before Christ died, they were all doubting all this other stuff, and then later on they changed and all this, and they lived different lives and sacrificed themselves. So that is one of the I don't know if it's in the book or not, but that's what was in the interview. One of the things that led her to cross that threshold, and I could comment on why I don't think that's very convincing to me. But was that in the book or not?
Alluded to it.
Because that was in the interview as one of the main reasons why.
I want our discussion. We're going to go over a little bit tonight. We do have the short. I think it's a 6-minute interview here, the closing part of the interview. But Josh said he wanted to say some things to the club. So if we can hear Josh Runyon on that. So this is part 4 of the 4-part interview. You ready? Eeny, meeny, miny.
Well, I mean, what's amazing is you seem to be making, like the movie, all the right moves. I mean, you just seem to be the perfect person for her to come to faith. And it's just really, discouraging to me how Christians, if someone doesn't, when they go out doing their evangelism explosion or whatever, and they give their little pitch, that if someone doesn't come to faith right away, they just go, oh, well, they just want to argue. If they have honest questions. And I mean, and you find that problematic and troubling, don't you, with Christian, when I'm talking about Christian evangelism.
Okay. So here I'll agree with you. And a lot of times I know it works because I hear people saying that it happens, really quickly, but I don't really understand how, because, the people that I've been involved with, which are not a lot, but who've come to faith, it's been a very long, slow process of, considering both sides of the issue. And that's how I think it should be. I mean,
well, and that's usually the format. But I was part of the EE thing, and we'd go out on our groups, and then there would be a group that got an instant convert. That someone was on drugs or whatever, going through a divorce, and they hit them at the right time. They're ready to convert, and they got the kill. And we just felt so inadequate that we didn't get a convert.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Have you led other people to Christ, or
not as explicitly as it worked out with Holly. I mean, I played a role in a couple other people, but sort of a smaller role.
You planted a seed, as the Christian say.
Yeah, I guess, or did a little bit of cultivating of somebody else.
Yeah.
But I don't consider myself an evangelist or anything such as that. That's why I was amazed and wonder of how it worked with Holly.
Well, and it must be fulfilling to have someone come to faith that's playing such a pivotal role. You know, women have not warmed up to apologetics. They just are not interested. And it's great that Holly and the people at Houston Baptist, the other women on faculty, do take an interest in this and do want to see, because there are evidences for the Christian faith, good evidences. And Christians don't even know their own evidence, and especially women. I mean, it's just sad. They read books like Joyce Meyer's "Eat the Cookie First." I mean, I see people on cruise ships reading Joel Osteen's book, and they think that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, you know, why do you think women haven't warmed up to apologetics?
I mean, yeah, I think there's, good evidence that that's the case, that they haven't yet. Hopefully it's just, it's part of a process but I mean, everybody's an individual first. So, so I don't want to just characterize, groups too much. Yeah, I mean, so I'll just say it's an interesting question, but as far as answering the question, you just have to approach everybody by individually, and certain things appeal to certain people than other people. And,
right. Well, speaking of appealing to Holly, what do you think of the role C.S. Lewis, John Donne, the literature played in her becoming a Christian? What did you think of that, or did you read some of the books yourself, John Donne and?
Not so much John Donne. She gave me a book of poetry that had him and some other people, and I read a couple, but I didn't get immersed in it. I was and am a big C.S. Lewis fan.
Wow.
She wasn't that persuaded before she became a Christian by C.S. Lewis. I mean, actually, one of our first conversations was that she didn't buy C.S. Lewis's trilemma at all. That was actually one of the very first opening things we had.
Did she believe it was legend? The fourth option, legend?
Yeah, so actually that's what I did, and I said, well, really, it's not a trilemma. It's there's four pieces to it, because Lewis doesn't even give legend as being one of them. But so I mentioned that there was actually four, but then I said, we didn't go really deep into this, but I said, there's good reasons to think that that only the Lord one is really the valid option.
I got you. So, Josh, what do you want to say to our group members, atheists and Christians? What advice can you give us?
I am just, I actually went online and saw, one of your group meetings and things like that.
Oh,
I think what you're doing is outstanding. And I am just so encouraged that this is going on. I think it's just not a model just for how Christians and atheists relate to each other, but how, something that the country needs to be relating to each other.
Oh, absolutely.
That you don't straw man each other, that you steel man each other and give each other sort of the best arguments and get together and respectfully dialogue with each other. And that was really the nature of Holly and my relationship. And so I think what you guys are doing is really what needs to happen. And it makes you both, better thinkers and better coming to the truth.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Josh. Appreciate you stopping by, and good luck with your group there in California, too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you, Bill, and all the best to your group out there.
Thank you.
Well, that's the last part of the interview, and he had some advice for us. So he's glad to hear that we don't straw man the arguments, except for Bill sometimes. But he does. We do try to steel man. Have anybody ever heard that terminology? What that means? About straw man. What that means? Straw man means that when somebody's making a case for something, you make a ridiculous approximation and then you destroy that. You make a straw man and then you destroy the straw man instead of hearing their real argument. The steel man is to try to understand the argument and even articulate it better than the person you disagree with. Let me see if I understand you. Is this what you're saying? And they go, well, that's actually better than what I said. That's called steel manning the person. So and that's what we do want to do. I mean, we have fun in here. We make fun of each other. I like to make fun of Bill sometimes. Because we're friends, we can do that. He can make fun of me. But ultimately, it's about respecting everybody here, regardless if you're atheist, Christian, agnostic, Catholic, whatever you are, your view, we want to respect that view. We want to hear what you have to say. So thank you for being part of the club. We are going to be looking next month, September 7th, at Ken Daniels' book. Let me pull it up here. The Why I Believed, and I will send you out a text and give you the website where you can get it for free, or you can do like I did, you get it for 99 cents on Amazon.com. Anybody else need one of the cards? You can put this on your refrigerator or even pass it out. I put them up at Starbucks sometimes, and so help get the word out on that.
Quick question, James.
Yeah.
Will you be getting back to us about what chapters will be in each section? Because I think there's.
I'm going to talk to Bill about that, and I was joking about that this isn't a democracy. So how many of you would rather just do the whole book? As you show of hands, you rather do the whole book next month?
Well, can I
Yeah.
say something? Why couldn't we do half of it in September and then the other half in October, and then we'll give it to you, and that way you can have November and December, which would be great for the Christian side of the.
Get a Christmas book worked in there.
You
for
get a
the
Christmas book for the Christians.
We'll give you Christmas. Let's put it that
We're
way.
gonna give you Christmas.
Well, I'm not opposed to that. I don't want anybody, either side, to feel like it's 2 whole months and we've not, we're having to do just the atheist or just the Christian for 2 whole months.
Since we do have the author, it'd be nice to bring him back in 6 months.
Or we could do the first half of McKenna's book in October, then the second half in December.
Whoa.
No. Well, I'll be honest. I like the continuity of it because I'd rather do half in 1 month and the other half the next month. That way, in my mind, this is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Kind of like when you're in high school and you have like quiz vacation and then you have your finals. It's like,
So we're not going to lose any of the atheists the 2 Christian months in a row, right?
No.
We've stuck around for this long.
Well, yeah, Bill and I will talk about that, but we'll take that in consideration. That does sound like a possible good solution to this. One of the books we're thinking about on the Christian side is also a lengthy book that would be maybe better divided in half.
There you
That's
go.
exactly right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're going to read the resurrection of the Son of God.
I've been reading that book for 2 years and I'm 3/4 of the way.
Oh my
through it. It's
goodness.
such a slog.
Wow.
Does anybody else need one of the DVDs? You didn't get the you want to get the Islam debate DVD and
Oh, by the way, James' book is coming out when, James?
October 2nd.
Right around the corner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's got radio interviews, calling him to do interviews. So really a cool thing to have him here.
So what book is it?
It's called What the Quran Really Teaches About Jesus, and it's a Christian Muslim book. So it's Prophet of Allah or Savior of the World. In fact, this debate is one of the chapters in the book.
Oh.
So it's basically for the Christian reader about how to have worthwhile dialogues with a Muslim. We do have things in common. We have some common ground if you don't look at the person as an enemy, and we have a lot of important differences as well. But this is a good way of starting a conversation with a Muslim. Khalil, who you'll meet, it may have gotten tense at a couple of places in the debate, but we're friends. We're still friends. Brady knows him too, and so anyway. So let's look forward to September 7th. And if you are new people again, if you're new, if you will give Brady your name and cell phone number, if you'd like to get a text, we send out texts with links to the book. And Brady, you take care of that for you?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we send out a reminder text, and we send out links to where you can get the books and
So
maybe a
that's
couple
not
other
like a
announcements.
personal text from you? It's just a.
It comes from my phone.
He puts in lots of emojis. It's very...
You're pulling the curtain back too much, Terry.
He's got people. Yes. When you're a like that, you gotta have people. I mean, it takes me all day to do this. He's got person at least.
I'll review every one of them.
And you responded back to me the other day.
Yeah, it really does come from my phone. I use an app to help speed it up,
Right,
and it
right.
comes from my
I
phone.
was
So you have to
just
type it out,
teasing.
type it out.
Hey, James.
Yes.
One thought I think maybe we'd all agree on closing the discussion on the book tonight, and that is that it's not an apologetics book, but she did come to one logical, profound conclusion that I think we probably all would agree with, and that is that everything ultimately hinges on the resurrection. And that was where she went over the edge, was after she did the deep dive on the evidence for the resurrection. So if the resurrection didn't happen, I'm staying home on Sunday mornings too.
Yeah, and that is, maybe we do a book on the resurrection at some point in the future, not a
Just not that
700-page book, yes, but something lighter fare on that topic. But it's interesting that in the scriptures, Paul doubles down on that. You know, because you think if there's no resurrection, you know, the tendency some people say, well, even if there's no resurrection, it's still a pretty good religion. No, he says if there's no resurrection, we are hopeless, we are worthless. You know, we're most miserable. It means that we're lying to you. It means Jesus is still in the grave. And he sets out, this is huge implications. If there's no resurrection, Christianity is not a good religion. It's a lie. You know, so, and that's what Paul says. It's not just me saying that.
But doesn't Paul sort of, like I would say, you have the argument that Paul created the resurrection story, and you know when the book of Paul came out, right? That's so of course he's
one of Paul's letters. You mean one of his letters? I will say this. I wouldn't say he made it up, but I would say that the earliest writings we have that mention the resurrection are from Paul. The Gospels, which come first in our New Testament, were written after Paul's letters.
Right.
But of course, if he's making up his own meaning, it doesn't matter, right?
Well, if he's making up his own meaning, he's going to be a cheerleader of that meaning. Was my point, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course, Paul believes in it's all
But
about
I still would have a tendency to say, okay, well, and in fact, as a Mormon, when I started getting the doubts about Mormonism and starting to see some of the evidence, I thought, well, maybe it's not true, but it's still a good place to raise your family. It's still, there's redeeming qualities to it. And Paul doesn't have anything to do with that. It's kind of like the trilemma, C.S. Lewis. You can't say if he's not the Lord, he's a liar or a lunatic. He's not a good man. He's not a good teacher. You know, he's either legend, liar, lunatic, or he's Lord. But you don't have this option that people want to go to. Well, I don't believe in the resurrection. I don't believe in that Jesus existed.
There are churches that say that.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Yes, you're right. And I would say that's not a valid position to have.
And by the way, that's where most of the, you hear about the reduction in membership, that's where most of the reduction has taken place.
Yeah, there's a lot of the mainline denominations, even a lot of the Methodists, some of the PCUSA, Presbyterian, some of the Presbyterians, you know, they're very much on social issues very liberal, but also on theology very liberal. And so they're going to say, they're going to have that thing, well, Jesus didn't actually rise, but he rose in the hearts of his disciples. Right. Oh. And I would say, no, I'm staying home on Sunday with Ron, if that's the case. We're playing golf. Yeah. So anyway, thanks again for being here. There's I think some more food left if you didn't get that earlier, and we will see you September 7th. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You need to.
You were not joking. Thank you for not.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
James.
Probably takes multiple